So with this album, Immersed, the music, the compositions themselves, the recording, everything was done with the idea of eventually being mixed and coming to life in Dolby Atmos. To me, actually, that is the music. I don't really think of it as an immersive mix. I just think of that as the music itself. And so once I finished the mixes and then had them mastered by the great Michael Romanowski, I reached the stage of completing the immersive part. And then came the concept of stereo. Now, there's parts of me along the way that considered not doing a stereo version of the record. Not for any reason other than, I don't know, I made a lot of decisions. I mean, even in the tracking studio and the compositions, like that's how I thought about it. But one of the challenges that we have in the commercial environment is that we don't have control over exactly how people listen to our music. Unless, of course, I was to only share it on Blu-ray as an example and say there's only immersive mix. And that's definitely something as an artist that you could do. But I'm personally excited and inspired to share the music and show the musicianship and share it with whatever audience is interested. And I don't really necessarily want the technology to be a barrier, even though the technology is deeply infused in the art. And so I had decided very early on that I would, of course, do a stereo mix and a stereo master of the record. But throughout the entire production, including mixing, including recording, including composition, I did not once listen to it in stereo or consider how it would work in stereo. The reason that I did that is I just wanted to give myself the space to let it become what I wanted it to become. As a professional mixer, I am always responsible to be considering the commercial translation of a project, right? So if a project comes to me, especially if it's been conceived in stereo first, I've got to make sure, unless there's been other discussions artistically, that there's some congruency there. And that's a very specific skill. And it's something that I've explored and done many, many times at this point in my career. And when we do that, it's not that we make sacrifices for the immersive mix, but we're certainly putting ourselves in a mindset where we're creating a relationship between a two-dimensional and three-dimensional image. And it does affect our decisions, or at least it affects mine. And I knew as an artist that I didn't want to allow that thought process to enter at any stage in the initial production of the record. When the record was done in immersive, the first step for me, of course, was, well, let's listen to the fold down. For anybody who understands the Dolby Atmos technology, you know, this is an adaptive object-based technology. And within the renderer itself, we have some brilliant technology that will take a 360-degree mix and fold it down into 5 channels or 7 channels or even 2 channels, stereo. Now, I've had great success in the past of working on immersive records that were immersive first, and then the fold down being very functional. A good friend of mine named Jonathan Kochuk, we did a record called Everywhen, which was an epic immersive project. And when it was done, we checked the stereo fold down. There was a couple tweaks that we wanted to make, so we saved a new file and we made basic adjustments. And he felt as a composer that it totally honored his music and it worked really well. In fact, that then got mastered and put on vinyl, CD. The Atmos went to streaming and to Blu-ray, and we did a cinema version, all from one Atmos file. And so when it came to my record, I was sincerely hoping for the same outcome, largely because of time. I'm already 2 years into the record at that point. I can't count the hours. All the artists out there and mixers, you know the deal. And so I curated a stereo fold down. I printed it out. And when I first listened to it, actually, I was very impressed. I mean, I thought, you know what? All the parts are there. I can hear every element. It's pretty cool. But I was I'd lost perspective entirely, to be honest. It was too close to what it was, and I was being drawn to the practicality of that process. And this is where my dear friend, my co-producer, Jurecka, comes in. Drew is the violinist on the project, but also the co-producer, and for this exact reason, because Drew's ability to cut straight to the music, cut straight to the chase with things, and, to have a completely objective and confident viewpoint on things is why we work together on this project in this way. And so I brought it to him. I was like, Drew, think this is sounding pretty sweet. Check it out. I won't use the exact words that he used, but I will say that they were immediately not favorable towards what was missing, the essence of the music, the essence of the tonality of the instruments. It just didn't work. And I needed that. This is why, when you're involved in a project as the composer and the bassist and the engineer and the mixer, it's why I had Michael Romanowski as the mastering engineers to get that perspective, and it's why Drew's in there as a co-producer. To snap you out of something and say, wait a second, walk away, come back and take a fresh listen to this. And it wasn't that the fold down wasn't presenting all the parts. It was. It's all there. I can hear every part of the counterpoint. But it lost the essence of the music, and that's not the fault of the technology. What it is that my orchestrations are very much front to back, bottom to top, back to front, these geometrical sort of orientations. All of a sudden, all that conversation was lost, and everything just became wide stereo. And the depth and the conversation and the detail and the counterpoint, as well as some of the fundamental tonalities of the instruments, were missing. And so I needed to walk away, and I needed to come back, and I needed to listen to it with fresh ears, and I agreed. I also, the co-engineer in this project, I sort of consulted and talked to my good friend Alex Gamble about it, and we both do a lot of work in the format, and we've both come to this conclusion that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Now with this project, in fairness to the technology, of course it wasn't. If you've watched any of the other videos on the record, every aspect of this project was tracked using immersive microphone techniques. We're talking massive arrays or various unique combinations of mics capturing reflections that were designed to be in separate speakers. And to fold that all down on top of each other is an absolute mess. Of course, if I was producing the record for stereo, I would have never placed the microphones like that. So that's part one. And, what I thought is, okay, well, maybe it'll be as simple as I just go in and I mute some parts. But that's where I realized when I was doing that process that, what? I just need to start again. Now, of course, in Pro Tools, I'm able to maintain all my automation. I'm able to maintain the plugins. A 916 plugin will collapse to a stereo one in most instances. And so I took the sessions, and I worked with my assistant, Andrew Chung, on this. I'm very grateful to him. We took all of the auxes, and if you've watched any of the mix videos or seen any of this stuff on this record, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tracks, like well over 100 buses on most songs. And changed those to stereo, got rid of the renderer, got rid of all objects, and I went back into the mindset of stereo. And I got to say, I wasn't prepared for just how much it would change my perception as a mixer. It was liberating again, and it allowed me to start to mix the record for stereo and to start to reorchestrate things that maybe were front to back to be left to right, to add new effects where I felt as though a gesture that was happening in Immersive was lost. Maybe more reverbs or more delays or more decorrelation amongst parts. And also quite a lot of frequency control to avoid masking. Because where I could have full range tablas in the back speakers, now when those are all put into two speakers, we have a whole new challenge of presenting the layers. I had, some opinions of some folks might be like, well, you might even have to mute some parts. There's a lot of layers. But as a composer, that wasn't an option to me. I mean, I think that the music itself is important. But of course, the levels in which we present things in stereo, the panning that we choose, the equalizations that we choose, even the reverbs we choose are different. And so I once again cleaned the slate, started with new sessions only in stereo, and said, okay, what do I want to do to this record as a stereo mixer? Just such an interesting reminder of this conversation between stereo and Atmos. If anyone knows my channel, I've been in Atmos since the beginning. And I remember the day that Apple first put on that Marvin Gaye tune. It was like, there's this Marvin Gaye tune in stereo, but now it's in Immersive and it's so much better. It's like you've never heard music before. And the thing is, I never bought that. I have videos on this. I don't agree. The thing is that the art of stereo is the art of stereo. The art of presenting music with two speakers and creating a soundstage in front of us is one of the most, I mean, it's such a deep art that at this point, when we say, hey, do you want to listen to some music? We're saying, hey, do you want to listen to a stereo recording? Music equals stereo. If you want to listen to mono, you'll identify it's mono. If you want to listen to Atmos or Immersive, you'll identify it. But you don't need to identify stereo. It is just what music is. And I come up through stereo. I work in stereo all the time. But as a professional, I'm always sort of stuck in this world of like, oh, I'm an Atmos engineer and I advocate for it. But as an artist and as a producer of my own music, it was so powerful to be reminded that when I want to make a stereo version, I'm going to make a stereo version. And of course, the immersive version is the primary version. So I don't know. I thought it would be helpful to just sort of share that mindset. I know this discussion has been around in our community for a very, very long time and probably will be for a very, very long time because we're all very fortunate to reimagine music that was initially conceived at a time of mono or definitely stereo. And in this case, it's a little different for me because it's my own music, but also because of the way it was conceived. And it's not a better or worse. It's just that's what it is. And so when I came to stereo in this case, it was all about cleaning the slate, starting fresh, and just trying to serve the music in that format. In immersive, I'm really not someone who cares about too much correlated compression. And by that, I mean, having to mix into a bus or having to use a plugin so I can compress the whole mix at once. I don't, it's not that I don't like it. I just don't need it. Rarely do I want the rears and the reverbs and the heights or the instruments up top to be compressing in, correlation with, let's say, the kick drum in the front or something like that. But in stereo, it's just so different, right? Like I love top-down mixing. I love mixing into a bus. And so the minute I took the record, I got it, I started remixing, repanning, and then I put it into my chain. And that's what I do as a stereo engineer. And it was just, everything started to make sense again. That kind of glue that we get from our tools. So, I mixed into my Fern VT5, getting some high end and getting a little bit of a boost in the lows. Then I also got a little bit of high mid-range out of my Terry EQ. Then I hit a compressor, a new compressor by SPL called the Venos. What happened is I got a demo of it and I sort of asked to not give it back for a while because I started mixing into it and I adored it. It just gave me the glue that I was looking for, and it just pulled the side image forward in a way that I loved. There's a little bit of my Maselec MLA4 just to tighten the low end a little bit of multiband compression on the way back in. A tiny bit of my MDS2, which is the Maselec de-esser. Again, just a little high frequency limiting. It's basically sort of mixing almost into a mastering style chain because I like doing it. And then I use the Lal Look Ahead limiter by Hum Audio to gain stage on the way back into the converters, which are my Vice converters for this record. And just getting back into that stereo mindset, it was awesome. And the one thing that I didn't do, I didn't compare it to the Atmos at all. I could have. No one's stopping me. I'm just on my own in the studio. I could have just done it. But what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to compare them. I didn't want to feel like, oh, the stereo is this and the Atmos is this, or the Atmos has this, so I want this. I just want to make the music, which is my music, feel the way it's supposed to feel. And I think that that's how we should always approach it. And so I'm all for when a fold down works, lucky us when it does. A reminder to always, when possible, focus on what the best decision is for the art. And I know that there are practicalities and there are timelines and there are budgets, and look, we're all facing them all the time. But that was the goal here. And so if you hear the record on YouTube in stereo with the videos, or you happen to be on a system where, let's say it's on the radio, or you're listening on a system or without headphones that are going to allow you to hear spatial audio or anything along those lines, I just want to make sure that the music and the feeling and the essence of the music is getting translated to folks. So now you know a little bit more about the backstory on the Atmos and the stereo version of the record, and I hope you enjoy both. Thanks, everybody.